The Railway series, and by some extension its most famous character, Thomas the Tank Engine, have been with us for 80 years. In that time, these railway books gave life to a television series, multiple real-life replicas of the beloved characters in the form of heritage railway events and amusement parks, a handful of world records, and above all, an international community of dedicated fans who hold this little engine so near and dear to their hearts. Thomas has played a big part in shaping who I am in my life, and for the longest time, I could never really pin down why. But now, as I'm close to fully entering adulthood, and because of how long Thomas has been around, I think I do understand why. So, let's have a look into how these living engines have had such a remarkable impact on the world. I want to start by looking into what is arguably one of the most important aspects of the Railway series' success. How it fully embraces what makes railways so special to so many people. Wilbert Awdry truly had an admirable passion for everything railway related, and so fully understood how to write stories in a way that conveys to the reader everything that's fascinating about railways and trains in general, which is something that can't really be said for most other intellectual properties revolving around trains. It's clear the philosophy behind a lot of other train properties is just, children like trains, so we'll make our generically written property about trains or feature a train to try and grab attention, and then proceed to not do any research into why children like trains. Believe me, watch any other train show like Driver Dan's Story Train, Titipo, Robot Trains, and We Have Paw Patrol at Home, and you can see where that philosophy rubs off. That's not to say it's bad. I mean, there are some shows that can pull it off fairly well, like Chuggington, but that's not the point. The point here is that Thomas absolutely understands why trains are such incredible machines. For instance, how they are mighty, powerful giants that require people to operate them, to allow them to breathe out their life. How there are many different locomotive types and what they're best suited for. And of course, how they can quite literally have a dialogue while in motion. Like, have a listen to a steam locomotive departing, and you can easily picture what they're saying in your mind by listening to their heavy chuffing noises. This was one of Wilbert's first inspirations he had. Since he lived beside a steep incline, he would often hear loud puffing noises from the engines involved. For example, the engine at the head of the train had a slower, more gruff-sounding puffing, as if he was saying, "I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it," and the smaller banker bringing up the rear having a faster, more determined and cheeky-sounding puff, as if he was responding, "Of course you can, of course you can, of course you can." These three aspects and more are what Awdry made sure to include in his stories, to fully get his perspective of railways across to the reader, and possibly inspire the young listeners to one day join the railway industry for themselves in some form or fashion. As the books went on, Wilbert started to make it very clear that Sodor absolutely took place in the real world, with real-life elements in play. We're not just talking about the famous real-life engines that have guest starred in the books, though that is a major contributing factor, but also the other elements of our world on display, such as all of the engines being based on real prototypes across the country, how real historical train tales and accidents serve as inspiration for similar mishaps in the stories, the very specific rail operations and manoeuvres being shown, and of course, the deeper real-life elements, such as the phenomenon of mass steam locomotives scrapping with the inauguration of diesel traction across the British Railways network. In this instance, Enterprising Engines, the 23rd book of the series, was published in 1968, and although the events of this book were set the previous year, the events of 1968 are integral to the book's theme. This was the year that British Railways finally did away with steam, and that was used to influence the book's stories, where Gordon learns the saddening news of steam's end, Henry proving that steam is more indispensable and reliable than diesel power, and the tale of Oliver's daring escape from the cutter's torch. Wilbert's connections to real-life railways and engines he visited also served as heavy influence for characters and settings for his stories. His love for the Tylwythlan Railway in Wales was very much projected into his Skarloey characters, who sort of became the backbone of the Railway series' history because of it. This strong influence of these characters in particular is partially why the Tylwythlan is such a world-renowned railway attraction to this day. The key appeal of the Railway series' setting is that it is very much a real-world setting. with real-world aspects and real-world railway operations, despite all the trains having faces. With all of the thought and care put into this remarkable world, that should mean that the stories are just as complicated, right? Well, actually, quite the contrary. These books started out as just simplistic bedtime stories, and while the stories did get a lot heavier in terms of character dynamics and overall story themes, the simplistic way in which the stories were told remained. Now, of course, I don't mean the stories were written simplistically or the characters just said simple sentences. I mean the stories were told in a way that makes it very easy for the readers to understand what's going on. Very rarely are things implied in these stories, as most of the time, everything is very blunt and simply laid out. Now, I'm not saying everything was so simple to the point where it was just brain-dead writing. What I mean is that the stories managed to be told very effectively. Their short length is a major contributing factor. The characters also look simple in design. We all know that Wilbert himself never liked Dolby's simplistic character designs in the illustrations, but these stylized looks undeniably gave a sense of simple, childlike spirit. Even the subsequent television adaptation of these stories was simple by design. The looks of the characters remain true to Dolby's cartoonish take on train designs, and the stories are all approximately 5 minutes in length, the perfect time limit for adapting short stories like this for the screen. Even the characters' faces with their easy to understand expressions feeds into the simplistic charm of the stories, and of course helped Thomas make a connection with autistic people like me. Less is more with Thomas in every aspect. Speaking of the television series, just over 40 years ago, these little stories were adapted for the screen. The late Britt Allcroft understood the appeal of this charming, simple storybook world, and saw the potential in using it as a template for a television series that children worldwide could enjoy.
The fact that the characters are largely steam trains, although not all of them, has an appeal because I think the sound of a train whistle has a universal appeal.
The talented minds of the crew behind the show managed to amplify these existing book stories and really show to the world that this is in fact a something for everyone IP. With experienced model filmer David Mitten in tow, Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends has become an international staple of popular culture because of all the love, care and attention put into this model world. Some could even argue that the crew were just playing trains in this enormous room, and they just so happened to be making a children's television series out of it. During the third series, Britt and David understood these characters enough to start writing their own adventures with these characters. Most of the time, these stories did in fact feel like stories from the books, and the characters are all still the same rude, jokey, hot-headed locomotives that Audrey introduced.
Hello, Lazy Wings. Are you too tired to fly today? The wind's too strong. I've been grounded. You need rails, laughed Percy. They work wonders, you know. Always.
Although not every story was up to the same standards of Wilbert's writing, the spirit of the imagination was still there, and the crew were never afraid to let it all out and try out new things. The road for the television show has been rocky over the years, and even very recently for some of us longtime fans, but the show has inevitably managed to regain its footing eventually. Even though the major companies that Thomas has been in the hands of for over 2 decades haven't exactly made the best decisions with the brand, they still managed to keep the show going regardless, especially with the truer, great content that does show up, which is always a treat. Throughout its 80 years of existence, Thomas and his friends have been inspiring to so many people across the planet, from the book stories being televised, sparking multiple real-life iterations of our favourite characters of various heritage railways and amusement parks, and even just people in the creative industry as a whole who have grown up with this little engine and used him as inspiration for their creative works. But by far, this little blue engine's biggest game changer for the world was the fan base it spawned. The sheer number of creative, talented and absolute free-thinking minds that have found their way into this fandom is incredible. Things aren't always high and mighty in the fandom, mind you, but you can't deny that the work of many a member of this fandom is absolutely something that shouldn't go unnoticed. Growing up, I was so delighted to find out I wasn't the only one who still likes a dumb kids show so many years after I realistically should have grown out of it. Getting to show off your talents in fun and often wacky ways, bringing to the table your thoughts on various aspects of the franchise, and making brilliant new friends through this fandom has been quite the pleasurable experience for me. When I eventually became an official member of the fandom in around 2020 or so, I felt ready enough to show off my creativity through this little engine too. And now look where I am. My channel is nearing its 5th anniversary, I've been to a handful of Thomas themed events, seen screen used props from the show itself, and made many wonderful friends across the world. It's been a rocky road on numerous occasions, but mostly, knowing there's many people who share my interests has really helped solidify who I am in the world. I don't think you'll ever find another fandom quite like the Thomas fandom. At the end of the day, over the course of his 80-year history, Thomas is, and always has been, a comfort character for children. Someone to just be there to put a smile on a child's face. Which was why Audrey told those first stories to Christopher in the first place. But of course, our Thomas's story is not yet over. There's still many more tales to tell, many more characters to meet, and more generations to bear witness to the appeal of this little loco. These engines have changed the world in such a remarkable way, and they will continue to do so just as they have done for 80 years. So, as this video draws to a close, here's to 80 more years of dry rails and good running to the really useful engines we adore.